Hey, this is Devin Neal. You're listening to the Devy Devotion.
Welcome in to the Devy Devotional Podcast, a show devoted to all things Devy and C2C. Hosted by John Arrington and Aaron Wilcox. This dynamic duo brings you actionable strategies with player-driven analysis for your Devy and C2C leagues. Let's dive in.
Let's dive into the NFL Combine and the freshman class. Continuing on with the freshman class. Welcome into Devy Devotional, where we stay devoted to Devy. I'm your host, Dynasty Coach A, joined as always by Aaron Wilcox at Aaron Wilcox 86 on Twitter. And tonight we're going to be talking about a little bit of Combine talk. I know it's kind of in our rear view at this point. We've moved on to the free agency and so much more. But Aaron and I haven't had a chance to talk about it just yet. So we're going to do that really quick. And then we're going to dive back into the 2025 freshman class. 2026 freshman class, I should say. And we're going to go ahead and look at the QBs and the RBs. We talked about the wide receivers last time, so we're doing all that. I guess it is the 2025 class. I'm I'm confusing myself here, but why don't we check in with Aaron? How are you doing tonight, buddy?
Hey, good. And like you said, we haven't had a great opportunity to actually chat about these combine takeaways. And I know you've been on other podcasts. I listened to a treat of an episode with you and Andy that actually dropped on the Devy Devotional podcast feed this week. So from Devy University. So that was very good. Hopefully the listeners enjoyed that. I guess we could say bonus podcast that's normally not on our feed from John. And that was fun though. So, today is going to be a good mix because we are going into the college freshmen coming in. I always love that conversation and love getting into those prospects, but also the combine is just a fun time of the year to recap some of the success that these guys saw. And we saw a pretty successful and exciting NFL combine this year. So it'll be exciting to recap maybe the top guys and potentially the least favorite performers as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry for the delayed start. For whatever reason, StreamYard wasn't wanting to go to Twitter. I'm guessing with all the issues that Twitter was having earlier today, that was probably something to do with that. And I was like, all right, I'm going to click on it one more time. And if it doesn't go through, I guess we'll just say, screw it. We'll just stream to YouTube. And it finally went through on the last one. I'm like, all right, here we go. So it's, we're trying to make it work here. Like I said, Twitter was having some issues. But yeah, the combine has come and went, and it was a lot of fun. We had so much athleticism, at least in this running back class. Some of the wide receivers even balled out. Maybe a couple surprises here or there, good and bad. But obviously, we have to talk about our favorite and our least favorite performers. You want to start with the bad news and get into the good news, or you want to do it the other way around?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly could touch on the underperformers, the kind of our least favorite performers for sure, because the favorite guys, I mean, there's some really exciting conversations there. So might as well get some of the underperformers out of the way. I think one really obvious one is Tez Johnson, wide receiver from Oregon. Not only did he come in small, 5'10", 154 pounds. So yes, 154 pounds for an NFL prospect. That is a tough weight. But then he had the third worst broad jump. Or actually, I don't know if that might not be true. 4.51, 40-yard dash, 37-inch vert. I mean, those. I think the 40 is the thing that he's gonna see that stock drop. Unfortunately, that's just not going to cut it for a guy who relies on speed, relies on burst, and those types of things at the NFL level. If he's going to be a legit asset for us on a fantasy. Or from a fantasy lens, I mean, he needs to be able to break off some big plays, beat the defense over the top, and just break some big plays with run after the catch. So unfortunately, Tez Johnson, just a faller. Yes, that 37-inch vert, it's fine. He did have the best 3-cone. So there's, I guess, a positive there, but we already knew he was quick. That's not enough, unfortunately, for a guy who already has some limitations on his production down the field. So he will be potentially drafted day 2. Sure, he might get a role from an NFL team. It's just for fantasy purposes. We should set those expectations, and they are lowered post NFL Combine.
Yeah, I was going to mention the 3-cone. I'm glad you did. Obviously it matters, but I think when you're looking at this, you're looking at an outlier player, and so we just have to decide, is he an outlier that we're willing to bet on? I've been basically out on Tez since day one. I mean, and by day one, I mean he started getting hyped last offseason, or this past offseason, going into the last season. All of a sudden, it was like, oh, Tez Johnson might be the number 1 in Oregon, and it was like, well, I mean, he might, like, as far as, like, the most receptions, maybe even the most yards, but, like, is this someone that we're actually going to get excited about? No. At least I never was. I'm still not. Obviously, the 40 time and everything didn't help. The 3-cone is fine. Obviously, we know that's what he's going to be used as, that quick, slot receiver kind of guy. But, I mean, the truth of the matter is his height-adjusted speed score is by far the lowest in the class, barely crests 70 height-adjusted speed score, and we have other guys, up into the 120s, and it's, I mean, you might not know, how to compare that or whatever, but let's just say it's a very large difference here. So we're talking about a guy who's very small, very slow at that speed, or at that size, I mean. And so we're really just asking him to be so much more than what I expect him to ever be. So I'm basically out. And we got Jamie in the chat. He says, we're here. Are we back again? Is it Optimus Prime time? It is. We are Optimus, and it is prime time. So we are here. Appreciate you listening, Jamie. And I just realized that my computer was not plugged in. So I'm going to do that very quickly. There we go. And so, obviously he has to be a big loser. Another loser, and by loser I mean a underperformer. I don't want to say loser, but an underperformer from the combine is a player that I've been pretty high on. I kind of introduced, I don't want to say introduced, but I put more onto your radar, towards the end of this past season, and that's Pat Bryant. And, I said, he's kind of been creeping up my ranks and everything like that. Well, he comes in 6'2", 204, but he goes and runs a 4.61 40, one of the slowest 40 times at this particular combine. Now, some players didn't run. We can't really truly compare it, but we had a lot of speed at this combine. And so you're sitting here comparing him to guys that are running 4.40s, 4.42s, 4.45, stuff like that, and so it's difficult not to say that he was an underperformer at the combine. It doesn't drastically change anything for me, but like I said, it's impossible to not say that he didn't take some kind of hit. And I have seen his projected draft capital drop since then. So I mean, obviously, it doesn't change that much for me, but it does change a lot for the NFL, or it can change for the NFL, and that becomes a problem.
Yeah, no, that's a fair call there. And like you said, if the NFL really doesn't see him as being as viable, that definitely drops where he's drafted, where we want to draft him as well. Even though it's not a death sentence necessarily. So yeah, and that's fair because there were several very tall wide receivers or guys with sizable frames who they performed awesome at this combine. I mean, they were great testers. We'll get into them in just a minute. So yeah, that's fair with Pat Bryant. I would say another wide receiver is Ricky White, wide receiver UNLV. Just underwhelming as far as measurables go. He's light, maybe potentially a bit smaller than we expected. He's 4.61 guy as well, only 36-inch vertical, middle of the road, broad jump, just not a lot going on for him. He needed a nice combine to really rise because he had already been falling a little bit or just not getting much hype or conversation. So Ricky White, unfortunately, is another faller. I'm curious, do you have any quarterbacks in your maybe least favorite combine performers here, John?
Not really, because none of them really did anything at the combine, or not nearly enough for me to even truly have a faller. And the one QB that just said, screw it, I'm going to go out there and do everything, Jackson Dart, looked pretty damn good. So, I'm not going to call him a faller or a disappointment or anything like that. I can't do. I don't really have a QB. I'm guessing from the question that maybe you have one, but I do have a running back or two that definitely fell for me.
Yeah, I was going to mention Quinn Ewers as just somebody who was in the drills, just looking inconsistent throwing the ball. And yes, he has a good arm, but there's just already those red flags with his profile, including durability, consistency, accuracy, and then he's flashing those things with zero pressure. This should be a great type of an event for a guy who has all this theoretical arm talent in Quinn Ewers, but just has not really lived up to it. He's limited many seemingly good wide receiver prospects during his time at Texas. Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell, Isaiah Bond, Matthew Golden, Ryan Wingo. He hasn't really unlocked those guys, and it's just showing that the consistency is not there. That might be a factor into why those guys didn't perform even better. But yeah, Quinn Ewers did not look good in those drills. Again, it's not like I sat there all day watching every single rep on every single drill for the quarterbacks, but at the same time, when I looked through some of his throwing, and when I saw some of those clips released, I was just not impressed at all. And that's not going to do much for his stock.
Actually, you know what? I completely forgot about that. But I remember now that I slid into your DMs. It was like, holy crap, Quinn Ewers looks terrible out there, and I completely forgot about it until you started talking about it. I'm like, wow, yeah, everything was underthrown. It really was bad. I was just thinking more of like actual like times and stuff like that more than the actual drills themselves. So yeah, I kind of messed up on that one. But yeah, Ewers definitely. Lost some for me, and I mean I was never a fan of his anyway, so it's like how much further can you drop? But the crazy part is I've actually seen people talking about him possibly in the first round and stuff since the combine, and I'm like, what did you watch? I don't know what's going on here. And just tracking back real quick, Jamie says, who's Pat Bryant? You heard it right here on this podcast. That's right, we definitely brought him up. And he says, Illinois guy, slow but great burst. And we saw that at the Senior Bowl. We've talked about this on previous pods, but like we saw Pat Bryant dominate corners at the Senior Bowl because of that quick burst and his ability to get open. So, 40 time isn't everything. Like I said, I'm not completely, taking him out of my ranks or anything like that because of a slower 40 time. He's a big guy, so, it's okay. But I'm guessing you didn't have any other quarterbacks that that fell for you. Obviously, I think we can say that Ollie Gordon has to be a disappointment or a faller for us. We've been probably back and forth. I've definitely been really high on Ollie. I think you were high-ish on Ollie at least at one point, and then obviously the weight gain. We never like to see that from any running back. Now he did dropped down a little bit for the combine. I think he came in at 226 when it was all said and done. So not the 240s that we were seeing possibly while he was a junior in college. But the speed didn't come back with that with that drop, like 10, 15 pound drop in weight. It was still just not ideal. So, he goes out, just puts up a pretty mediocre 34.5 vert, 120 broad, nothing special, and then goes and puts up the 4.6 140 time, and it's just like, well, if he could have gone out there and at least just put up like a 4.52 or something like that, we could probably say like some NFL team's going to say, oh yeah, look what he did his sophomore season, we can get him into our training room and do this and that, and he'll be our guy. But you start getting the 4.6s, and I don't know. It's a lot harder to excuse away some of that stuff.
Yeah, he's just a guy who desperately needed a win, and this was not that for Ollie Gordon. So, yeah, unfortunately, those scores did not come in very well. I know it should be size adjusted, right? So at the end of the day, it's not like he can't still succeed, but not a trending up player by any means. I think one other back we could mention here as a potential disappointment from the combine, that's Jordan James, Oregon back. Not that he had the worst 40 time, like 4.55. That's solid. In most years, we actually would be like, oh yeah, not bad for a guy who has solid size, but he's just not quite as big as we thought he potentially could weigh in at, and he still ran that slow of a speed. And he had the third worst broad jump. His athleticism score was 28th amongst running backs from the combine. Jordan James was just not quite getting it done, looking a little subpar there athletically, and he's just not really separated himself in this pre-draft process thus far. Can he still have success? Yes. What I love, like, for example, the Minnesota Vikings, they just re-signed Aaron Jones to a new deal. Would I love them to draft Jordan James in like the 5th, 6th round? Absolutely. So it's not like he's dead, but he's not doing himself any favors with the combine performance that he had.
No, and I can't say I was ever the biggest fan of James. I know he got a lot of hype, especially going into this last year here. But you know, he was underwhelming compared to Bucky Irving. At least, I mean, to me, from what I'm looking at, I didn't like him as much as Bucky. And then, you know, Bucky ended up being what, a 4th, 5th round pick in the NFL draft, and I'm like, well, if Bucky's that, and I like Bucky better than him, you know, how much can we love Jordan James? So it was really tough to fall in love with him too much. But I mean, the amount of hype that he got, I really expected more than what we've seen throughout the entire offseason. And I mean, it seems like the NFL, even analysts, everyone are just kind of coming around to it. It's like, yeah, he's not that guy. There's too many good running backs in this class that we just don't need to worry about Jordan James anymore. I mean, like you said, once again, not dead, not impossible for him to find a solid landing spot or anything like that, or possibly see the field. But I mean, I don't have him in my top 15 running backs. I don't know about you. If you still have him up there in your top 10, top 15, but yeah, he's close, but he's not in my top 15.
Sure. And when it's all said and done, there might be 20 running backs in this class that potentially matter, that they factor in. And a lot of the fringe running back 2s, running back 3s for NFL teams right now are going to be replaced. So could he replace somebody? Yes. But is he going to become like the stud starter at the NFL level? I mean, based on what we're seeing, probably not. He did have a very promising 2023 season that was behind Bucky Irving, but then coming into that bigger role in 24, like you said, was not necessarily a breakout player. Quite, his counting stats were fine. His touchdowns, you know, he's involved in the receiving game. It's fine. Just wasn't quite what you wanted to see from an explosiveness standpoint. But I am curious, speaking of explosiveness, what were your top performers, your favorite performers from the NFL Combine, John?
I mean, I don't think we can start without talking about Basil Tootin, what he did. You know, going out, putting up a 4.38 originally, and it was like, all right, this guy's fast, you know, and you know, he's gonna do big things. He had already done his vert, he'd already done his broad jump. You know, we knew he had burst already. Then he goes and runs a 4.38. Then he goes and runs it again and runs a 4.32. It's like, holy crap, dude. Yeah, I love it. I've been a Basil Tootin fan for a while. I have him on a couple of C2C teams. Possibly could have had him on more, but you know, it doesn't always work out that way when you're going through drafts and you're trying to figure out, you know, different players and all that kind of stuff. But I love the fact that he's actually on people's radars now, because it seemed like he wasn't truly on the NFL's radar. Obviously, going to the Senior Bowl was great. You know, he looked good, but it's hard for running backs to look amazing or do anything amazing at the Senior Bowl. But he just goes out and he does this, and we know how much speed matters for these NFL teams, especially nowadays. I think I mentioned recently on one of our pods how, you know, I really don't make a lot of changes to Beth. I really go out of my way to not make changes if I don't have to, or if I, you know, if I can help it. But one of the changes I've made more recently to the running back model is, you know, was focusing more on burst, focusing more on speed, focusing more on big playability. Because the NFL's getting away from that workhorse, you know, 240-pound running back, you know, that we used to love. You know, that you're seeing a lot of guys that are going out 199 pounds, 203 pounds, whatever. And yeah, they might not touch the ball 30 times a game, but they touch the ball enough, and they're so damn explosive that it doesn't matter. They're still putting up big points. And so Basil Tootin, I think, you know, with that 40 time, even though we sit here and say, oh, 40 time's not that important, blah, blah, blah. But when you put up that kind of 40 time as a running back, I think he is a difference maker for an NFL team. They see that, and he has to be the biggest winner of the entire combine, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely a big winner. I will raise you one other NFL Combine winner, and that's Amarian Hampton. It's one of my favorite backs from, for years and years he has been out of UNC. So Amarian Hampton, he has the number one RAS score amongst all 25 backs, but he also is 14th all time from 1987 when that was started. The tracking was started to this year, 14th all time, Amarian Hampton. That's just insane. And he's doing it at 221 pounds. He's 6 foot, 220-pound back. And he ran a 4.46, a 38-inch vert. And, those things are kind of surprising when you look at them, right? Always just an underestimated guy as far as the speed goes. And, most people did not expect quite this level of speed, maybe like 4.5s, but he just came out there and he showed that, yes, he's an explosive guy and he's great after the contact. He's forcing missed tackles. 73, I believe, was the number for missed tackles forced this year. He had 1,200 plus yards after contact, number 2 in all college football this year. It was insane. He was the offense. The offense was not very functional, yet he was able to succeed. And he's been doing that the last few years. So he, at the end of the day, is that bell cow type of back. Like you said, the NFL doesn't need that nowadays, but they're not going to scoff at it either when a guy like that is so athletic. So definitely continues to be a favorite of mine. Definitely a riser coming out of the combine. Potentially a round 1 pick now at the running back position. As surprising as that probably would sound if you rewinded a year or two or whatever with Hampton. But, it's hard to comp a guy like that, but he's putting himself in the conversation of like the Nick Chubbs of the world, the Josh Jacobs, the guys who can go really early in the NFL draft, who can command a heavy workload at the NFL level and be a factor even in the receiving game for sure. So exciting player, Amarian Hampton, out of the combine.
Absolutely. He was a huge winner. And I don't really get it. This isn't to put down film grinders or anything like that by any means. I just don't understand. Like, I don't watch the players. That's not my thing. I don't like sit here and grind film and do all that. But I can't tell you how many film grinders I had that said he's slow. He's not going to perform well at the combine, and he's not going to be as fast as we want him to be. He's not he doesn't have NFL athleticism. I heard that over and over and over again, and I was not watching him, so I'm just taking it from I'm just taking it from all these film grinders. Okay, well, if they're saying it. And I'm sitting here going, his numbers look pretty damn good, but I'm expecting him to be slow at the combine. And I even made some stupid comments just because I was going off of what other people said. And I'm like, well, yeah, he's up there now, but what happens if he goes and runs a 4.6 or whatever? And it's like, and now looking back, I'm like, holy crap, I was wrong. But I was just going off of what other people were saying. So, it's kind of crazy how we saw what Hampton did, but then we saw like a Caleb Johnson, who we didn't even talk about as possibly another faller, but he didn't have the greatest combine comparatively, and they're similar sizes and all that kind of stuff. And it was, so you see what Hampton did, but obviously everything's easier in context and everything's easier in hindsight. But I'm looking at Hampton's big time run rate. And over 8%, with thinking about how he was basically the entire offense for that team, almost makes me think I should have kind of picked up on the athleticism more, because they had no one else to do anything. The teams knew what they were going to do, and yet he's still breaking off a play every 8% of the time. That's kind of wild, when you stop and think about it. And so yeah, with that, he has a 111 weight adjusted speed score, one of the higher ones for the running backs. In fact, there was only one player that was higher, if I have that right. So definitely pretty exciting with Hampton there. So got to call him a riser as well.
I like it. Who else did you consider a riser from the combine?
So this one's going to be more of a riser for me, but I think it's mostly for everyone. It's kind of the similar thing. I was just basing things on what other people were saying. for Quinshon Judkins. And then he goes out and just, dominates, kind of does very similar things to what Amarian Hampton did. Not quite the same size, but definitely, actually pretty damn close. So, but, not the exact same speed, but just right there. I mean, the burst is there. He has one of the highest burst scores in the draft class. He has one of the better height or weight adjusted speed scores of the draft class. And then we already know what he did, in his college career. He has that weird sophomore season that I don't really understand at all. And then he has the splitting time with Trevion, which, we can't really like truly knock him for, because obviously we also like Trevion a lot as well. So Quinshon is one that I was like, you know what, I really needed to see him actually be athletic, and he actually went and exceeded all of my expectations. I don't know about everyone else's, but I know there was so much talk after that championship game when he got run down, after like a 40-yard run or whatever it was, and it was like, well, he's not fast enough for the NFL. Very similar to Hampton, what I heard about Hampton. So I'm just listening to other people, and I guess I need to stop doing that.
Yeah, and it's one of those deals where, yes, he's not like a 4'3" guy, no, but I mean, he's like 220 pounds and at that 4'8", or he's hitting in game like 21 plus miles per hour. So he's certainly checking some on the field speed scores. I mean, his RAS score, we talked about Amarian Hampton here, who had 14th all time as far as that goes. I mean, Judkins wasn't far behind him. He was 23rd all time. So, in fact, he is the first running back in combine history to post an 11-foot or greater broad jump at 220 plus pounds. So he is a guy who has plenty of burst. Yes, he's not the fastest guy out there as far as the top end speed goes, but he can rip off chunk plays and he can score touchdowns. We've been seeing that since he was a freshman in the SEC at Ole Miss. So Quinshon Judkins definitely enough to be a lead back in an NFL backfield, even if maybe he's not this elite generational type of guy. He doesn't need to be. Very much a riser coming out of the combine, still scoring well athletically, even being at 220 pounds. That was almost the most impressive thing for me. I could have seen him doing that at 210 pounds, but I mean, 221, that's pretty great for Judkins. So I would agree with you then. Maybe I'll shift away from the running back position. There were some other guys like Trevor Etienne. I think he ran well enough. He showed enough as far as that burst score goes to maintain some shred of relevance. RJ Harvey also performed quite well at the combine. He had like a top 5 burst score in the running back group. He tested fast like we expected, jumped high, all those things. But I would say that at the wide receiver position, we had some standouts that should get our attention. And Matthew Golden, I think, does need some recognition there as far as just that 40 time. It puts him on the map. He has to be a riser for NFL purposes, for draft capital purposes. It's not necessarily saying, okay, he's this great producer all of a sudden. It doesn't change the limitations with his production profile. He's still an intriguing guy. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But Matthew Golden running a 4.29, outproducing or outrunning Isaiah Bond, his fellow teammate, who was expected to do some very good things at the combine. Matthew Golden at least did enough there to thrust himself into potential day one draft capital territory, being the first wide receiver drafted in the entire draft. So that's notable as far as, what we're talking about. We're talking about combine risers, not necessarily like, who should we be moving way up our Devy ranks, but as the definition would lead us to believe, yes, Matthew Golden would be a guy who, one of my favorite performers from the combine, just because I did not see that speed coming. He doesn't really play with that amount of speed, to be fair.
And it shows. No, so I think the thing with Golden is he was already before the combine, before the 4.29, he was already kind of being pushed up into that early second round, late first round kind of territory for combine drafters. So unless he really gets pushed up into like, 15th overall or something around there, I don't even know how much we can say he's an actual riser, because like I said, I for whatever reason, teams were already saying, or mock drafters or whoever were already saying, like, hey, this guy's a late first, early second kind of guy. And I'm sitting there going, like, what the hell? And then he goes and runs a 4.29. I'm like, well, at least now there's a reason for it. It might be a dumb reason, but at least now there's a reason for him to go that early. We see teams fall in love with speed all the time, but we also see how often it doesn't do anything, and those players are terrible. The crazy part is, like, I know I've been lower on Golden for basically ever, but I honestly wasn't even paying attention to the fact that he played 16 games this year, and he didn't even break 1,000 yards, and it just blows my mind. 16 games in college, you run a 4.29, and you're essentially the only wide receiver available, like, to do anything. Isaiah Bond was supposedly hurt the entire time. Everyone else on the team, Jonte Cook got kicked off the team. Everyone else basically sucked, except for Gunnar Helm, who runs a 4.9, and yet you couldn't crest 1,000 yards in 16 games. It just absolutely blows my mind, but that's not what we're here to talk about. So, actually, I do want to ask you, because one player who probably shouldn't have run his mouth and was probably a faller because of it was Isaiah Bond, and I know you have been a Bond apologist. And so I wanted to ask you, like, where are you on the Golden versus Bond thing? Because I know you said, hey, Bond had some injuries that he's had to deal with and blah, blah, blah. And it seemed like, at least in our early on conversations, that you were higher on Bond than you were on Golden. Is your mind being changed now? Are you being swayed?
Yeah, well, coming into the season, definitely was high on Bond coming from Alabama, coming over to Texas, and it just did not materialize. You could see a sudden drop off when he sprained his ankle and sustained that injury midway through the season. And Bond never really recovered, never looked right, and played a full complement of snaps. After that point, he was playing in some games, but not playing well. So Isaiah Bond declaring, I mean, I think he's just taking a shot on NFL teams will look past the production and look at the player and the talent. So I think there's plenty of talent there. I wouldn't feel comfortable putting Bond as a faller here, because he still ran a 4.39. I mean, it's not like it's terrible by any means. That's a fast time. I don't get the whole, like, oh, I want to break the record and all this type of thing, except a lot of these guys probably are thinking they could, maybe get within reach of it, but I don't know. It's silly. He's a guy who's probably faster. Maybe if he was coming off of a completely healthy season, but we just don't know. At this point, there's a lot of speculation. Am I comfortable drafting a guy very high where it's just, well, if he wasn't injured, well, he was injured and he wasn't that productive this year. But I think that we're going back to some of the Quinn Ewers concerns that we were talking about earlier. He was not consistent as a quarterback. So you know what? That's going to hurt Matthew Golden. That's going to hurt Isaiah Bond. It hurt A.D. Mitchell. It hurt Xavier Worthy even. We just knew that Xavier Worthy had been doing it for years, regardless of quarterback play. He broke out early in college. Something that, Bond and Matthew Golden had a little bit weaker breakouts, but they did break out early in college as well. So it gives me some hope that there's something there with them. But, am I super high on them in this class? No. Isaiah Bond overall has been a faller for me in the process. This combine didn't really change anything. Unfortunately, he didn't come in like even in the low 4.3s. He's a 4.39, but again, it's not a bad score by any means.
Absolutely. And yeah, I didn't mean he was necessarily like an actual faller, but it was just hilarious that he said he was going to break the record, and then he goes and runs a 4.39, which is still blazing fast, but like nothing. You don't run a 4.1, dude. Sorry. So I have two more wide receivers that I feel like are winners here. It's Alec Imanner and running a 4.44 at his size. I know there was people that were questioning his athleticism at points, and I think you've even said that he was like a track star and like all this other stuff. So I don't even know why they were questioning his athleticism, his speed. And then also we got to talk about Jaden Higgins going out and running a 4.47 at 6'4", 214. Like that's pretty blazing fast for that size. One of the biggest, or one of the best speed scores of the entire the entire class. In fact, Matthew Golden goes out and runs a 4.29, but at his size, at his height and weight, he has a 109.7 height adjusted speed score. Jaden Higgins has a 111.6. So I mean, just shows you, like, when we actually put some context to it and everything, technically you would say that Higgins is actually a little more athletic for his size, like, something, however you want to word it. But with that, I've seen a lot of people pushing Higgins way up. And I mean, I'm talking like all of a sudden he's being talked about like top 3 and stuff from some people that I've seen online, which is probably a little hyperbolic, a little crazy. But are you there with Higgins? Do you think it's just like one of those fast guys, or do you think there's actually more to it? Because I've always been a Higgins fan, but it was more like, oh man, I love him as a sleeper. I don't know about like, oh man, he's my top 3 wide receiver.
Right. Yeah. He's a great value, maybe late in the third in rookie drafts in dynasty leagues, or, that kind of range. But as soon as he starts getting like early second round rookie pick consideration, I think it's a bit early for him. We'll see where he ends up, I guess, right? Landing spot, draft capital, all those things. But at least the testing was very solid. I was using Raz earlier, so I'll use it again for him here. 9.87 out of 10 on the Raz score. So that's 46 over the last 40 years. 46 top 50 wide receiver. That is pretty crazy testing wise, as far as adjusting for that height and size. But I will say that though he ran that 4.47, a 39-inch vert, ultimately it didn't really change a lot for my film evaluation. I still see a guy who's inconsistent separating at times. He wasn't necessarily consistently winning down the field this season. He was getting a ton of first downs. I think he was second in the nation in receiving first downs this year. I mean, he was just converting at an unreal rate, but it just wasn't necessarily, he's not like a 4.3 type of guy. He's not that type of a freak of nature. And there's other guys in the class. You said it, like Amenor, he ran faster than Higgins. And I like Amenor more than Higgins as well. So if anything, I think that Jalen Noel also impressed. So wide receiver, Iowa State, like both Higgins and Jalen Noel, both those guys, they were pretty good at the combine. And I think that Noel's somewhat of a riser coming out of it. Not that I'm a truther for him. I think he's really more limited to a slot role. He kind of gives me like Khalil Shakir vibes, but Jalen Noel, he'll be able to do whatever an NFL team wants him to do. It's great for a team. For a fantasy squads, like, so what? He was like the best special teams guy in the Big 12 this last year. So what, right? Special teams is not scoring us a lot of fantasy points other than in the Scott Fish Bowl. So it's like, I don't know. Jalen Noel, solid player. He's a better pro prospect. He's got more going for him than Tez Johnson at 5'10", 194 pounds, at 4.39, 41.5-inch vert, best broad jump in the entire draft, best bench press in the entire draft class amongst wide receivers. Those are all good things going for Jalen Noel, who ended up testing quite well, and he's just a versatile player. So a couple of Iowa State winners out of the combine. I like what they're doing training wise there. But no, that does not make them stars by any means.
Yeah, I agree with that. I have Higgins quite a bit higher than Noel. So I don't know if that's how you feel about it as well. But the last player, and then we'll dive into the freshman here. And this isn't even a player I'm overly excited about or anything, but like, you want to talk about height adjusted speed score. Dante Thornton Jr., do you think because of his 4.3 40 at 6'5", what was it, 205 pounds, he runs a 4.30 40, do you think that's going to push him up in the draft to where we're going to at least have to like humor him being in our ranks and things?
Yeah, he's definitely going to have to slide into the ranks there. He certainly could get drafted high enough. I think like round 3 sounds pretty realistic for what the NFL might pump him up to, because they want those field stretchers on the outside, and maybe they're going to hope that he could develop into a DK Metcalf or somebody like that. But at the end of the day, I'm not that hopeful for him for fantasy purposes. But for the NFL draft, certainly is a riser coming out of the combine. I thought one other wide receiver actually worth mentioning too was Ty Felton. Maryland wide receiver. He ran a 4.37 and a 39.5 vertical. So Ty Felton, kind of a bigger guy as well. So I like that for him. At the end of the day, do I think he's a star? No, but I prefer him to Thornton, for example. I think that there's definitely more to his game. He's a better all-around wide receiver, and I would be more comfortable drafting Ty Felton in rookie drafts. And he's 6'1". I expected him to be more like 6'2", but still he tested pretty well there, like a top 12 type of tester overall, especially once you adjust for like his size and all that.
Yeah, I was just wondering, because right now I have Felton quite a few spots ahead of Thornton, but that's because Thornton's really not projected to get great draft capital. But I'm wondering if he's going to, because of that, that 40 time, like you said, if he gets up in like the 3rd round, if I actually change him in Beth to the same exact draft capital that Ty Felton is projected to get, they end up tied. So, I'm not saying that's not like overly high in Beth, but still, like it just shows you what what that 40 time could do. It's not necessarily that we overreact to it, but these NFL teams do, and so we see it happen all the time. So just someone to keep on your radar. I know Andy from Devy University, my co-host over there, he's been a little higher on Dante Thornton, just like as like an actual pure sleeper. And he obviously has athleticism. He has the big playability. I don't know if he's an amazing wide receiver, but we will have to wait and see about that. But that is your combine recap. Our we definitely listed more than 5 of each, but our top performers and underperformers and everything. But we are also here to talk to you about the freshmen. Aaron, do you want to start off with the quarterbacks or the running backs? Which one are you feeling now?
I have no preference on them. I think both groups in this class, they're different levels of intriguing. We'll say that. there's a lot more hype for the quarterback class in comparison to the running back class from what I've seen. But
I've heard
we can
a
start
lot
either way.
of people talking about it's not that great of a running back class and all that kind of stuff. So why don't we just get it out of the way, and then we'll dive into our quarterbacks after that. Now, I have my top 4 listed here on the screen. If you guys are watching, obviously we will talk about them here in a second. If you're listening on the podcast, this is not a consensus or anything like that. This is my top 4, and I want to start with, I'm assuming his name is a Kylan Deer. I'm not 100% sure if that's how you pronounce it, but a Kylan, a Killen, whatever it is, Deer going to Alabama. He doesn't seem to be getting any love from anyone, and it kind of blows my mind because he's a highly rated recruit. He's going to Alabama, and we can't even say that there's anyone at Bama that we're like absolutely in love with running back wise or anything like that. Obviously Justice Haynes went to Michigan. Jam Miller's still there, but he's really never been a true thing or anything like that. And then there's another running back. Was it Richard Young that that some people were excited about, but I don't think anyone was overly excited about Richard Young last year. So who exactly is holding Deer back in this offense, or is it just that we didn't have great running backs last year, so we're just going to use that against Alabama running backs now? That doesn't sit well with me.
At the end of the day, talent and athleticism, those things are factors we have to take into consideration. And Deer going to Alabama at 6'1", 200 pounds, 21.4 miles per hour speed. In fact, I saw out there he has the best in-game athleticism score in this class, according to Real Analytics for the running back position. So that's pretty cool. Going to Alabama, we like big athletic backs, absolutely. And his production was solid. It was against middle tier production, and he was not a receiving back, so we just don't know, how is that part of his game going to ultimately end up. But at the end of the day, he makes sudden cuts at full speed. He's a north-south guy. He's not messing around with too much lateral stuff. Like, he's using that speed to his advantage. And I thought he had good enough contact balance, solid enough vision. At the end of the day, I don't know if he's this super advanced, like inside type of runner. I don't know that he's going to be the most or the most elusive guy we've ever seen, but at the same time, he has some of the most important things for the running back position: burst, vision, size. He has a great landing spot in the SEC at Alabama with some opportunity, like you laid out. I think he could get an opportunity year one. So yeah, Deere, I think he belongs certainly in the top 5. He's in my top 5 in this class as well. He's not my number 1 though.
No, that's fine. And like I said, I haven't seen him in a lot of people's even top 5s, much less number 1. I'm still working on Fresh Beth, but I'm actually feeling pretty good. I was looking back at previous years, and I'm feeling pretty good about the ranks. That being said, it's not perfect. It was never meant to be perfect. In fact, of anything that I have done Beth-wise, it actually takes the least amount of actual, production or anything like that, because it doesn't do any of that. It's really just looking at composite score, size, and landing spot. It's just kind of saying, like, this is generally speaking, if you have this kind of grade and you're this size and you go to this school, you're going to be good, and that's kind of like the way I'm looking at it. I try to look at it as a general idea of how to feel about a player. And it's actually worked out pretty well, at least, from just looking the past year or two. So I get maybe he's not the most, like, he's not the number 1 running back for everyone, but I feel like he needs to be talked about more. But we have 3 other players here, and do you want to talk about your number 1, since obviously Deere wasn't him, and is he on this list?
Yes, he is on this list. Any ideas who I'm going to pick here, John?
I don't think I could be very wrong. I don't think you're a Bo Jackson guy, even though I feel like Bo Jackson has been largely considered the RB1. I think you're going to go with Davidson.
Ooh, that's a good guess, but I'm actually going Usman Chroma, going to FSU. And it's not because of the landing spot, because trust me, that FSU squad was real bad last year. The running game was just pitiful, but I do think there's better times ahead for FSU. And I also am just very, very much after good players here. And there's opportunity for him to start right away, but at 6 foot, 200, and we'll call him 210. I don't know. Like, the ranges of weight kind of vary depending on the site you go to, but he runs faster times than Deere does. So he runs between 21 and 22.6 miles per hour, depending on the different times and different games you watch. And Chroma has a very strong rushing profile, but what he has that Deere and some other guys don't is a great receiving profile, production against good competition. He has a basketball background. He has the ball skills, and he's a skilled lateral mover too. Those are things that I'm looking for. He has the athleticism, but he has the additional lateral ability. He has the additional receiving threat game. I think that, the comp Javonte Williams has been thrown out there, which I don't think is fair at all. But we also need to remember Javonte Williams, pretty good prospect coming out. Injuries and other things have limited him. But I think that there is higher upside with Chroma than that. I think that his long strider tendencies. We just talked about how Omarion Hampton, people did not expect him to run very fast because they were watching him play. And there's a certain bias when you watch Chroma playing. He has that long strider tendency. You don't think he's very fast because his legs aren't moving at quite as fast of a pace as some other guys, but he's covering a lot of ground very fast. I think Chroma is just going to be a stud with a 3-down profile. For me, he is the running back 1 in the class.
I like it. I mean, I definitely have him up there. He is so all of my top 4 are really, like, almost essentially tied. It's really close. I mean, you could basically say they're tied, or they're close enough to where like if Aaron sways me or says like you should like Chroma more, I'm not even opposed to just moving him up and doing it that way. Which is why also that's why I was thinking it could have been Davidson. Maybe you were thinking more the landing spot and everything, because I have them all so close together that it's really hard for me to differentiate. But yeah, I do see the receiving profile. It said he had over 700 yards receiving. I think in his last year. Yeah, in his senior season, 53 catches and 730 receiving yards. And that's not even something I look at in FreshBeth or anything like that. But obviously, knowing that and adding that into how FreshBeth's feeling, how Aaron's feeling, and all that, like I'm starting to get more excited about him as well.
Absolutely. And I suppose like the landing spot maybe gets him slightly knocked in your model too. But yeah, definitely a guy who could have ended up in the SEC, but just decided to stay with FSU. But I will give you credit. So you called out Gideon Davidson, and he is my RB2 in the class. So you're right. Bo Jackson's actually 3 for me. So it's not like I hate him actually at all. But Gideon Davidson at 6 foot, if he comes in at 200 plus, he's definitely going to stay at RB2. If he comes in lighter, because I have seen the lowest that he's been listed was 185 pounds, but I think that's like a junior season weight that just has not been updated. So he's an early enrollee for Clemson. He is going to get some opportunities very early on, and some of his speed that's been thrown out there from a testing or on the field standpoint is very promising. He tested at a 10.69 100-meter time. That's very fast. His highest on the field speed was 21.9. So estimated like a 4.4 is kind of the theory out there for his speed. And apparently, I think this is in the C2C athletic comparisons tool. His athletic comps, Gideon Davidson's comps, are Christian McCaffrey, Barry Sanders, Gale Sayers, and Quentin Portis.
Oh my God.
And I mean, I don't think I actually see that when I'm watching him out there. I'm like, he's not that special. Come on. But he's a first team All-American. He back-to-back Virginia Player of the Year for the state. Again, an early enrollee for Clemson, another thing going for him. And his production was pretty nice. He showed that he had some receiving involvement. I don't think his level of competition was anything that I would rave about, but at the same time, I think he just has enough to his game: the lateral ability, juice cuts, footwork, vision, contact balance, like all these things that you're looking for out of a well-rounded back. And that's very promising. So I like Gideon Davidson a good amount. I just need to make sure that he's actually in like the 200-ish pound range, and that his speed in college matches up with what he was, I guess, at in high school. Sometimes it's surprising to see some of those comps, and I don't know if I'm fully buying in at that degree of hype with Davidson, but he's fun.
Yeah, and I have him listed at 193. That was actually a weight that I got from Andy A-Star FF on Twitter. And so, like you said, he's actually listed at 185 on 247. That was what I originally had him at. Once I put him at 193, it did move him up into that top tier. So obviously size and weight is going to be a concern, or at least something of interest that we're going to need to pay attention to, because that's a big discrepancy there. That's a big difference there. Even just 185 to 193. It sounds stupid, but we're trying to meet thresholds here and things, and it's just one of those things where you definitely. You have so much. Yeah. Actually, Aaron's saying that he's actually listed at 193 on 247 now, so that's good, because I thought I had still seen the 185. But yeah, we'll have to just wait and see if he ends up coming in any bigger or anything in the spring practices. Hopefully, we'll get that information here pretty soon. And that brings us to the last one here in our top 4. And you had already said that he was your RB3. He's my RB4, and I'm not saying anything about. That's one thing that I'd picked up on quickly with FreshBeth is for the running backs, the composite score doesn't matter nearly as much. So I'm not really discounting Bo Jackson that much because he's a .932 compared to those other guys that we were talking about before, .973, .966, and .962. So, I mean, a huge difference as far as their composite score. You're talking about high end 4 stars compared to like low end and things like that. But obviously he's still a 4-star player. Not discounting him too much. He's going to a great landing spot at Ohio State. Although Chip Kelly's no longer there, we don't know exactly what's going to happen with the running game and everything. But we're still expecting big things from Ohio State and from all their players. So we love all that. There's not even that much competition. We have James Peoples, who did not do much in year one, actually looked pretty terrible in year one, but it was a very small sample. And I will say, of anything that I picked up on over the years, it's that running backs aren't necessarily who they were in year one. So if I was going to ever forgive anything, it would be a year one running back. But that doesn't mean that Peoples is all of a sudden going to be this absolute stud or anything either. We have C.J. Donaldson coming over from West Virginia. Not too much beyond that we really have to worry about competition-wise. So I get wanting to be excited about him. And once again, he's in my top 4, so I'm not hating on him. But it doesn't sound like he's... Like, everything I read and everything, it doesn't sound like he's this amazing running back that we really like is just going to go up and just dominate, all touches and is so athletic that he's going to put 1.4 PPR points per touch like Travion Henderson or something like that. I don't necessarily see that player either. So why does he seem to be getting pushed up to RB1 by a lot of people?
Yeah, partially opportunity and landing spot. And he has a size, 6', 205. So Bo Jackson has a lot of things going for him. A good production leading up to, those. I guess he missed all but 4 senior season games this year because of injury. And so I think production there when he was playing was strong. And his I guess in-game athleticism score, I cited that already once with Keelan Deere being the number 1 guy in the class as far as that goes. Well, the second best guy was Bo Jackson. So there's some athleticism markers that he's showing up well within. And I think he's a tough runner. He's fast enough. Again, maybe more of a long strider. So a little deceiving for his speed, but I think he's good there. And he can fight through contact well. I like that. They'll probably have enough power, but I just don't know that he's a super creative back. He obviously had a little bit of injury history there, missing some games. So we'll see. He was RB10 in the composite. So obviously they saw him as a faller as well. A lot of that has to do with what have you done for me lately? He was not rising up in recruiting circles. So those guys tend to fall when they miss time their senior season, unless they're like so solidly entrenched at that very top, which apparently Bo Jackson was not. So yeah, I like Bo Jackson a lot. Certainly could take that position day one. I think he has the talent to be the RB1 in the entire class. So there's a lot going for him. I need to see some of those things from maybe a lateral movement standpoint, the creativeness as a runner. Right now, I think he could be like that Caleb Johnson type of guy stylistically, not always the most fun, but functional and effective. So Bo Jackson certainly could have a bright future there at Ohio State. And now we've been able to get through your top 4 guys. I have one more guy actually that I think belongs in this list.
All right, hit me with it. Maybe he'll be my next guy.
Yeah, you might like him because this is a guy who also, like you said, the composite rank is not the end-all be-all for you in the recruiting services. But I do think that it's interesting that Shakai Mills-Knight is rated higher than like Bo Jackson, for example. He's rated top 6 in the class overall in the composite. That's amongst all the recruit services kind of combined together for that composite score. And Shakai Mills-Knight, now his size is all over the place. Like I saw 6'1", that's what I've seen most consistently. I think one site had him up to 6'3", so he's kind of a tall player. That's too tall. I don't know that I love him if he was 6'3", but I'm seeing 6'1", 220 pounds, but he's still running a 10.9. He's still running 21 plus miles per hour. He is the RB1 for Rivals, for example. They're one service who really likes him. Apparently through campusdecaden.com, he's the most athletic back in the class for them. I'm assuming that's a size adjusted thing, but he's just not really a lateral guy, but at that height and that size, I don't think he necessarily needs to be. That's not at least needs where he needs to win. He is quick. He's fast enough. And I actually think that he's a fine receiver. I think he's able to play a good role in the receiving game. Maybe he's like a Rashad White type of player at the end of the day. I think that there's plenty of similarities there with how they play, maybe how they'll end up. But in a down running back class, Ja'Kai Mills-Knight go into Ole Miss where there's opportunity. Certainly we saw Quinshon Judkins play significant role there as a true freshman. We've seen Zach Evans. We've seen guys play well and produce well at Ole Miss. So even Snoop Connor, and you go back to Jerrion Ely, like Ole Miss has quietly had some good producers. It's just sometimes they don't have the athleticism or they don't have the size, but Ja'Kai Mills-Knight, he has both of those things. Yeah. So I think it's very intriguing.
He's my next player. So I'm right there with you. He's not even that far behind the top 4. But he, just for whatever reason, I mean, Ole Miss, like you said, hasn't really quite put out the stud running backs that we want to see. We've seen, some decent ones. We've seen them make to the NFL. We haven't really seen that true stud. And so, I feel like at least the way that I'm looking at it, you got to discount it a little bit. But that being said, he is definitely exciting. He is my next player, but I have a tier of 4 players here. So he is the next player, but he's also tied with 3 other players. Would you like me to go ahead and list them out, or do you want to guess them?
Let me see if I can guess here.
Okay.
Taking a quick look at it.
All SEC running backs. How about that?
Oh, okay. All SEC running backs, huh? Yep. Well, James Simon, Texas back.
That's correct. He's literally the next player. So.
Do you have Marquise Davis, Missouri back?
Nah, he's a little further down, but he's not that far away.
Shoot.
He's not in his next 3.
You can hit me with the guys then. I was hoping to go 100%.
Yeah, no. Like I said, Marquise Davis isn't that far. I don't even hate the landing spot or anything going to Mizzou. So he's not too far behind. But I have James Simon, Byron Lewis going to Florida, and then Torrey Blaylock going to Oklahoma as the next 3 players. All similar in composite score and everything. Well, actually, Blaylock's a little further down there, but going to Oklahoma, we've obviously seen them put out some quality players to the NFL and everything. And he has decent size, not amazing or anything, but looking about 5'10", 195. That's perfectly fine. I feel like he can easily be over 200 pounds when it's all said and done, possibly even that 210 pounds. And then Byron Lewis going to Florida, looks like he has about ideal size, already at 200 pounds. I know a lot of people like Jaden Baugh, and I was never the biggest fan of him. I didn't really see anyone like special in Jaden Baugh, so I'm looking at Florida and saying like, hey, Montrell Johnson's gone. Obviously, Trevor Etienne went away, last year, and if I don't think that Baugh is anything all that special, then maybe Lewis could go ahead and eat into that role or possibly take over altogether.
Okay, that's interesting. I did not expect the Byron Lewis hype there, but that's a fun player. So I don't can't knock it with some of the points that you made. He's not necessarily my guy. I think that just peeling back the layers with Byron Lewis a little bit, he was not very efficient in high school. So typically I like a guy who maybe is like 9, 10 or greater yards per carry, and he was like 7. So Lewis was pretty inefficient, and I thought that his athletic testing was actually really poor. I don't have the numbers on hand, but not that can't turn around. We've seen guys come out of high school not being very impressive athleticism wise. Saquon Barkley is always the fun one where it's like, yeah, the guy was running like 4.7. Like he was just super slow coming out of high school, and you're like,
and he got a little bit better by the NFL, right?
Yeah, right. But Byron Lewis, I don't know at Florida if he's gonna truly break onto the scene, but he certainly could. But let's see. I mean, I think that Torrey Blaylock, he was more of like a sleeper. Like I thought I liked him, but you really do like him. He has some good testing speed, like 10.6 speed. So I mean the guy's fast and he definitely improved his senior year there in Texas. So he's never been like a workhorse, but I think that the flashes are there for sure for him to be an exciting player for Oklahoma if he can actually get on the field, which there's some roadblocks there. But yeah.
No, yeah, absolutely. And you're starting to get to the point where it's difficult because they're all kind of ranked about the same as far as like composite score. We can there's even more players like Jordan Davison, Marquise Davis, who you talked about, JT Lindsey. Like they're all within a couple hundredths of a point of each other as far as or a couple thousandths of a point, I should say, as far as composite score. And so there's not much difference there. So then you're really looking at the landing spot, you're looking at the height and weight, and a lot of those guys are all the same. You're looking like 216 pounds, 210 pounds, like things like that. So it's hard to differentiate there, and that's really where you might have to say, are they going to be able to see the field? Are they going to be able to do this? And that's probably what I have to go through with these running backs next and try to figure all that out.
Absolutely. Like, for example, some of the smaller guys in the class, I kind of nuked, honestly, from a ranking standpoint. Just not going to take shots on them. Even like Anthony Rogers, who's like a top 5 guy in the composite at the running back position, 5'8", 190 pounds at Ohio State. I just don't think that he really stands a chance there to win a meaningful role, like to be a big time back. I think that Bo Jackson has got that job on lock compared to a guy like that. Not that he's like completely tanked in my rankings, but he's definitely further down. But I did tank Gerard Pringle Jr., even De'Aaron Hill some. I like Hill a lot. He's a sleeper at Oregon. I like his game. He's elusive. I think he's a versatile back. He could be the next Bucky Irving. I've said that before about De'Aaron Hill, but he's still got to be down there. JT Lindsey, he's way down there for LSU. The one undersized guy that I still kind of hang on to rankings wise, and this is not that I have him high, but Harlem Berry. We have not talked about the only 5-star running back in the class. Yeah. The 5'11", 175 pound 5-star running back. I think that's just a head scratcher. I understand when you put on the film, he is just so awesome in high school. But then you look at his competition level, you're like, oh, well, this makes sense why this guy seems so studly, because it was like bad competition, even worse than Elvin Henderson in the class, that's real bad. Harlem Berry, he has the skills. He has like the Jahmyr Gibbs skill set, but he's like 170 some pounds. It's totally different than a guy who's like about 200 pounds like Jahmyr Gibbs was coming into college and remained at. Like, even though Harlem Berry might be 5'11", if he just truly has just such a limited frame, I just don't know that he's ever going to get there for us. He does have 10.5 speed. He definitely is a versatile guy, but I think Kadam Durham there at LSU, he's definitely going to be the preference there when they're looking for a finesse or a speed back, and he is there for 2 more years. So it's like, good luck to Harlem Berry. He needs injuries to happen. I think he's going to transfer out of there before that happens, but we'll see. But he's still top 10 for me in the class, but he's more like at that 9 range. But I think it was about time that we give him a little shout out. I will add that I liked your James Simon shout out. A lot of folks are not high on him. You won't find him in many C2C or Devy top 10 lists. He is in mine. James Simon going to Texas at 5'11", 200. I think he'll be like more like 210, 220 coming in. I don't think that he necessarily killed it efficiency wise in high school, but I think he has what you need out of the back, a back nowadays, the receiving ability, enough athleticism, the size, the landing spot. We know what Texas can do for the running back position. I know this was a down year this year, but they've put out some promising guys in the past, and I think they're going to stay kind of a power there in the SEC. James Simon, Texas back. I like that you mentioned him as a top 10 guy. I also have him there too.
And we have question marks about Cedric Baxter. He, once again, I'm not saying it's the end all be all, but like he wasn't great in his year 1. Obviously goes out and tears his ACL in year 2, misses the entire season. we have to have questions and marks about that. Trey Wisner is not a good running back, so there's not that much that we have to be concerned about beyond Cedric Baxter. And if Baxter isn't who we thought he was, or isn't 100% healthy, then we have to question, can James Simon get on the field? And like he might not be the biggest or the best athlete or out there or anything like that, but it just sounds like he's an all-around good running back. And sometimes, especially at these bigger school programs and stuff, that's at least enough to be in your top 10, your top backs. I get, your services and places like that might be looking more for your amazing athleticism, but at some point you have to be the right size and do the right things as well. You can't just be Harlem Berry at 175 pounds, even though he's that fast. Like, yeah, that's great, but unless he can get up, 190, 195, 200 pounds, then we're not going to truly matter or care about him. And on top of that, Caden Durham is one of my highest rated running backs in the entire Devy realm. So we're saying we have question marks about CJ Baxter. I don't have too many question marks about Caden Durham.
No, exactly. And Caden Durham, that was a great shout out last year. Like we went in depth in this freshman that incoming class last year, and I was really happy with the results that we had. We touched on Caden Durham, Nate Frazier. Neither one of those guys were necessarily consistently talked about. They were obviously mentioned, but I feel like there was other preferences. Obviously, we did like Taylor Tatum, but Jordan Lyle, another guy that I, made sure that we brought up last off season, and now he's in a great situation there, coming off of a good freshman season. So it's fun looking ahead to these guys. I am curious. I guess another reason we should add to the conversation with James Simon and Texas, and like what's going to go on there in their running back room. A big question is Michael Terry III. Like, is he going to be maybe the next Texas running back? From a quote unquote theoretical talent standpoint, Michael Terry, he probably trumps James Simon. Sure. Michael Terry, he's just a great athlete. At one point was even a 5-star type of guy, 10'8", 100-meter guy at 6'3", 217 pounds. Michael Terry's got some unreal athleticism, but he's no Derrick Henry out there. He just isn't. He doesn't have the finesse, and he does not have that power. Derrick Henry is a one-of-one guy. Those guys don't grow on trees. In fact, Michael Terry is being treated as a wide receiver coming in by Texas. That doesn't exactly scream bruising running back. It screams a little bit more finesse player. And 6'3" finesse back, I don't know. That sounds kind of weird, doesn't it, John? And I think that Michael Terry, solid enough for sure at the running back position. I just don't quite see that high end talent where he's a great NFL prospect. I do think he's a good back, but I just don't think he's a perfect fit for any position at the college level. And that's an issue. Sometimes you get these tweeners. They're just not quite good enough and nuanced enough to be a wide receiver stud, but kind of the same thing with the running back position, not quite good enough to make it as a true NFL back.
Yeah, and I have them up in the mix, but it's so tough. I mean, how many 6'3", 220-pound running backs, actually hit? And unfortunately, it seems like these bigger backs more recently, look at your Rocket Sanders, who was kind of in a similar situation, right? An athlete, switches or transitions over to running back, 6'1", 6'2", whatever he is. And, he might even have been enlisted as 6'3" at one point. And, looks amazing in year one. And then because of that bigger frame and everything, puts on another 15, 20 pounds. Next thing you know, all that athleticism's gone. And I mean, I hate to say it, but we've just seen it happen too often recently to like where we can't guarantee that won't happen with Terry as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Not to spend too much more time on the running back position, but I just have some names I want to throw out there. We don't even have to go into them. We already mentioned Marquise Davis, Missouri back, who deserves some hype. Bo Walker, actually going to Georgia. I think he deserves some talk amongst the backs in this class as well. He hit some good athletic marks, and he has the size. Omar Mabson, Auburn, which people will be like, whoa, why are you talking about an Auburn back and it's not Elvin Henderson? Yeah, I mean, Elvin Henderson is just so overrated from a production standpoint. Elvin Henderson tore it up, but it was against terrible competition. I mean, just terrible. And his stats look great, but in the context of how they were accumulated and how he looked doing it, just not a whole lot of finesse there. Just running straight line for touchdown after touchdown. Elvin Henderson dominated, but I think the better back going to Auburn, surprisingly for some, is Omar Mabson, who came out actually early. He reclassified. So he had a very good true junior season. And he said, you know what? I can just go to college early. Like, he's going to be super young back in his class. And guess who wanted him? Georgia, Alabama, USC. But no, he chose Auburn. He felt good about that situation, that opportunity there. 21.6 miles per hour. Omar Mabson's a real sleeper. You don't have to draft him very highly, but I think that there's something there. And he seems like he has the frame for it at 5'9" or so, and then 200 to 210 pounds. He's interesting. Harry Dalton the third going to USC. I think USC needs a back coming in there as a converted quarterback. He also had high-end offers like Alabama, USC, Ohio State, Penn State. Harry Dalton, I think he's a solid enough back. You want your next Notre Dame back, Nolan James Jr. Certainly could fill that role. I mean, we know that there's a bit of a logjam there at Notre Dame. It's really an issue, and Jeremiah Love is holding that up because he's very good back, and he's going to get some heavy workload again this season. But Nolan James is a talented guy at Notre Dame. A C2C favorite, Jace Clarizio, going to Michigan State. You'll hear the C2C guys talk about him on their podcast. So check out they'll add some, I guess, further context into him. We already mentioned Torrey Blaylock, so that was a good shout out by John earlier. I guess like Michael Turner going to Baylor. I just don't love that he's coming off of a serious knee injury. Jordan Davidson going to Oregon. I think he's just a plotter. I will kind of die on that hill. And one more guy, my long tangent here of names.
Before you say his name, I've been sitting here waiting for you to list this one name off, and you haven't. So I'm wondering, is this it? Are you finally saying his name?
Tell me the name here, John.
Anthony Rogers, Ohio State.
Oh no, sorry, no.
Oh.
But actually, I had just kind of pushed him aside because I already had just mentioned him really, really briefly with like the undersized guys, and Anthony Rogers, Turbo Rogers is his nickname.
He's not that small. He's 5'8", 190. That's not that small going into college. He could easily be over 200 when it's all said and done.
At that 5'8" frame, I think you and I have had that conversation before, where we kind of don't really like guys to be that short. Not that I'm opposed to him having some success and maybe being up to 200 pounds. I just think that Bo Jackson battle there is going to be tough for him.
Do you know who his comp is, though? I mean, it's not that hard to figure out, I'm sure, but
Trevian
A-Chan.
Okay.
And at least that's from Andrew Ivins, director of scouting. Reminds us of Devin A-Chan, and it's just talking about he has a laser time 4.48 in the 40 already. He's running a 10.77 100. Well, I guess that's wind aided, but he low 11s in the 100 meters, doing all kinds. I mean, he's I think multi-sport athlete, doing all kinds of different things. It just looks like really hyper athletic. Obviously, it's talking about his size. It's talking about he needs to get better at pass blocking and all that kind of stuff. But we were saying how that Bo Jackson isn't necessarily like the best running back that we've ever seen. So it's not impossible that Anthony Rogers goes out there and carves out a role. And we've also seen them use two running backs, substantially very recently. Now they were both two very high end running backs. So I'm not saying all of a sudden he just, he just gets that. But I don't know. I guess I completely missed you like listing him off earlier, but I'm just sitting there going, why isn't he set him? Why isn't he set him? Why isn't he set him?
Yeah. He's in this huge tier of like guys from You already mentioned like James Simon, Michael Terry, Marquise Davis, and then he's next up there. He's right in that range for me, where I don't know necessarily how to rank those guys. They're a big blob of guys there that I don't necessarily love, but they all have a claim to becoming risers at some point, becoming legit Devy assets. So it is good that you notice or you shout him out because he deserves some more attention. He's going to Ohio State. He's super athletic. I didn't see quite that level of speed on the field. That was one thing too. His testing times were one thing. When I was seeing him out there, like he was fast, but also it wasn't only that. Like, I mean, if he seemed like a true Devin Chain type of guy, I would love that. Didn't quite seem that fast on the field. And then I just thought that there was no power to his game. Like the size frame is going to be an issue. Maybe he's not 190, but we'll have to see, right? You got to trust what's out there as far as the sizes go to a degree. And yeah, a little skeptical. But the one guy I was going to mention there that I just love, and this has to be out there on podcast form just for because everybody's going to say this is a long shot. This is not going to happen. But Jasper Parker, Michigan back, I think could be the next Michigan stud at the running back position. However, it's just going to take a while. And we are so impatient as Devy and C2C managers. And that's why I'm not going to have him like top 10 or anything. But Jasper Parker, Michigan, 6 foot, 200 pounds. He had a breakout high school senior season. Very, very solid rushing plus receiving flashes. And he was even against solid competition. And I know he's kind of a late riser, so he didn't quite get the true rise. But I think in the composite, he's still like roughly top 20. And yes, he's going to need to put on a little bit more weight to his frame. He's pretty lean, but 6 foot, almost 200 pounds. I like that. And I just think that his burst, his pop to his game, his ability to maintain balance and outrun guys, it's really quite entertaining. So I think Jasper, if he can just last, 1 or 2 years there at Michigan, he could be the next guy up. And we know sometimes Michigan is loyal with these guys where it takes a year or two, but then they get their opportunity and they put out good rushing production. And I think there are exciting things ahead at Michigan. So Bryce Underwood, who's also coming into this class as a promising freshman quarterback, this could be a guy who pairs really well with him when Michigan's back at their peak powers. Jasper Parker could be the starting back at that point. So just looking a couple of years ahead, I like Jasper Parker running back going to Michigan.
Yeah, I like it. Obviously we know Michigan running backs have been great, especially in college, at the very least. So that could be great for C2C purposes and a name to definitely keep in mind. I have him listed at 189. That's what he's listed at on 247. So obviously we would need to see him. He's 6 foot 189 on their website. So I would need to get an updated weight because obviously that's a pretty substantial difference there. And that when you're talking about with fresh bet, that makes a big difference. 11 pounds of weight and moving into different thresholds and everything can make quite the difference there.
Yeah, absolutely. He does need to put on weight. He looks lean, but I saw the 200 pounds out there. So I think if that's somewhere close to what he ends up in at the end of the spring or summer, that's pretty great. How about any other names that I missed here at the running back position? I've rated out more guys, but there are still a few guys that I'm needing to evaluate in this class too. So I have not gone through everybody yet. I don't know how deep I'm going to go. Every year, it really depends. In this class, it's just kind of an underwhelming one. So I want more sleepers to draft from, potentially identify in this class, but it's not the strongest. There's plenty of fun small guys, but I mean, how much do we want these really small guys?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, like you've already mentioned them, and that's where we start getting into a lot of the smaller guys because they're showing up here because they have a decent composite score. They might even be going to a decent school, but yet they're 188 pounds, 182 pounds. I don't know if you had mentioned Gerard Pringle Jr. going to Miami. He's listed at 5'10", 182. It's difficult to get too excited about him. But he's right there with De'Aaron Hill that you had mentioned earlier, like going to Oregon for me. So it's just like towards the end of the ranks here, but they're actually tied for composite score in .936, both going to pretty decent landing spots. Oregon and Miami, they're just small at 188 and 182 pounds respectively. So nothing. It's really difficult to get excited about either one of those, but like I said, we can get excited about the landing spot.
Yeah, exactly. And we know these guys pack on pounds, so I am just super curious to see how they weigh in this summer and see who enrolls early, gets an opportunity early on, because that's something we look for year after year. We say, how early can these guys get their opportunity to shine, and ultimately, like their weigh-ins may be significantly different too than what they showed their junior year in high school or whatever. So, those are things that we have to adjust to. And as freshman drafts are coming up, just try to double check those things just to see if there are some kind of risers or fallers from that. But yeah, fun overall running back class. It's not great, but at the same time, I think that we gave you some reasons or some folks to be interested in, some guys that we certainly like at the top end, but then there's also some depth guys in intriguing situations with some either its size or situation or athleticism to their name that could be really fun. So we know that the future of the running back position is kind of changing with, no longer is it a prerequisite that you're 215 plus pounds. Certainly can make it work at 200 pounds if you have all the right skills and opportunity.
Yeah, I was looking back at previous years and just trying to see, how it all works out. Like I said, I've been pretty happy with it. Going back to 2023, there was 5 players that were all pretty much like right in that same range as the top 4 that I have for this year. The Deere, Davidson, Jackson, and Chroma. And those names were Justice Haynes, C.J. Baxter, Caleb Jackson, and Quentin Joyner. And then Roderick Robinson wasn't that far behind them. And those are all players, for the most part, that we liked, at least at one point, or have gone on to do pretty good things. Obviously, we know Haynes is being considered a top 5 running back in the class. Baxter, yes, he's had some issues, but he's still being considered one of the higher end backs. Caleb Jackson is one of the weirdest things that I've ever seen happen to a running back. I don't really know what the hell happened there, because we were all excited about Caleb Jackson, and then he just kind of died. Although we can say Caden Durham came around, that didn't help. And then we're all really excited about, or at least you and I are very excited about Quentin Joyner, going over and going over to Texas Tech. And then Roderick Robinson, if he doesn't get hurt and have turf toe and everything else, we might be talking about him, a really different way. And I'm not just trying to pimp my own stuff out or anything. I'm just saying, like, those are all in that same range as that top 4 that we have here for this year. So, it might not be the deepest running back class ever or anything like that, but I think we're going to get at least 2 or 3 really solid running backs out of the top 4, 5, 6 guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, even some of the guys who didn't hit, and there will be guys out of this draft class who we like who don't hit for various reasons. It could be like what happened with Caleb Jackson. He took a Raheem Sanders type of fall where he just gained some weight, and I don't know if there's maybe a little bit of injury mixed in there, but coming out, Caleb Jackson, just a fun guy to shout back out at LSU if he can ever figure it out, because he was a 10-8 guy in the 100-meter dash, and that's at a notable size. He averaged 14.7 yards per carry in high school. He was a stud production wise. 14.7 yards per carry at a guy who's like 200 to 215 or so pounds. Now he's like 225 plus, but Caleb Jackson, he was fun. But yeah, at the end of the day, things change really fast in the running back landscape. Can't stay too set on those old guys. And now we have Caden Durham coming up at LSU. I'm kind of curious just to see who compliments him this season. I don't think it's going to be Harlan Berry. I don't think it's going to be, who was the other guy JT Lindsay. Both those guys are finesse guys. They need that big banger. So maybe Caleb Jackson will compliment at LSU once again.
And then looking at 2022, the top 4 from that one: Nick Singleton, Le'Veon Moss, Trevante Citizen, who ended up getting hurt and really never coming back to form afterward, and then our boy Omarion Hampton. And those are all basically tied with the top 4 from this class as well. So, and then Branson Robinson was the next one, another one that's dealt with injury. Unfortunately, these players get hurt and then we never hear from them again. But that doesn't mean that we didn't like them at one point. And actually, Jaden Blue, Jamarian Miller after that. So some pretty decent running backs. So like I said, it gets me excited when I look back at that stuff, and then I go, man, we could get some really solid players. Imagine if, we say, oh, we can get the next Omarion Hampton, we get the next Nick Singleton, we can, get the next whatever out of this class. That would be pretty exciting. So I can't wait to do that. Obviously, we've been rambling, and that's what we do. So we're going to go ahead and skip the QBs this time. We're going to talk about the QBs on the next one. We like giving you guys as much information, or at the very least, we like hearing our own voices and just rambling on and on, which is what we do best. So we're going to go ahead and split this up, do the QBs next time, and just, call this one quits. Appreciate that. I only have, maybe I need to actually add some more names to my list here, because you were kind of like chomping at the bit trying to get a couple more names out of me. I only have 19 running backs in my 2025 ranks, so I might need to actually go out there and throw a handful more just to make sure that I'm not missing anybody that could be a potential sleeper or anything.
And well, that's fair. I mean, I have like maybe 23 guys that I actually like, maybe, for so far. So that's not far off from you. I have other guys rated and just don't really have any interest in them. So yeah, for me, it's like after we get to maybe the top 16, 17, 18, 19, yeah, after that range, I don't know that I'm going to be drafting those guys after that point in supplemental drafts. And, some years maybe you were. There's interest deeper into the class, but yeah.
I think that's why I stopped, because I got to a range where I'm like, I'm not going to touch, but at the same time, maybe there will be a couple that will surprise me that I haven't actually looked at yet, and they might actually be a little higher than that range that I'm looking at right now. So I'll add in another, I'll do the next 5. It only takes like 3 minutes anyway, so it's really not that big of a deal. I'll add in the next 5, see if anyone else jumps out, and we can always talk about that on a future pod. But I think we have done enough of all that for now. If I can get to the video portion, then I will say we appreciate you guys listening. It's been a lot of fun. We will be back in your ears as soon as possible. But for now, we're going to go ahead and cash out. See you guys.